you could spend your life on a beach, on an island or something, then you're like, no, I want to go back to the office and do something completely different.
I'm really crazy about creating something. Creating and changing, that gives me the kick.
I have access to the platform since April, May timeframe this year, and I'm absolutely blown away by the insights.
For the moment, we analyze around 1 billion of transactions per month.
Wow.
For all the different markets, not just for Germany, in order to come up with our data.
Let's talk about state of things in the e-commerce market in Germany as we speak.
Is it relevant that company focus on profitability? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
But interestingly for me is, I believe many companies haven't realized yet what it really means. And let me explain that.
Hello and welcome to the EGN Podcast powered by the e-commerce Berlin Expo. I'm your host, Efe von Thenen. Today's episode will be packed with data-driven insights for e-commerce and projections on the future of digital retail. Our guest today is Friedrich Schwandt, founder and chairman of Statista and now co-CEO and co-founder of ECDB. Friedrich is a seasoned industry pioneer, bringing decades of experience in data-driven insights and digital transformation. Friedrich and I will discuss the pressing challenges retailers face in today's e-commerce world, marked by an immense focus on profitability. We'll discuss approaches on pricing and overall how businesses can harness the power of data to make better decisions. If you're looking to understand how to navigate the complexities of the future, this episode is for you. Let's jump right in. Friedrich, welcome to our show.
Hello.
You came all the way from Hamburg today. We appreciate it. And I have kind of an imposter syndrome sitting in front of the founder of Statista and also the CEO of ECDB and also Mr. Data Insights. Super humbled and super happy to have you in our show. Thank you for your time. And how are you today?
I'm absolutely fine, actually. So when driving from Hamburg to Berlin, it's always important. Do you have a freeway and you just can dream and think about other things? Things are fantastic. If you have a traffic jam all the time, then I don't like that so much.
I hope you listen to some podcasts on the way. Do you listen to podcasts often?
I listen to podcasts from time to time.
Yeah.
I do listen more to music, actually.
Yeah. I always have to listen to something somehow. But I tend to also listen to my own podcast, which it's kind of hard at the beginning. You hate your own voice and everything, but it's important because then you can learn a little bit about how you can improve. You could improve yourself. So today we're going to talk about quite a few things. You are many things in one person. You're a successful founder. You obviously founded Statista, and now you have a second spring with ECDB. Mm-hmm. We will talk about both of those companies. We will also talk about data insights and e-commerce, because you've built a platform full of data insights specifically for e-commerce. We will get to that. And so we will talk about some trends in e-commerce, where the industry is going. I will give you a crystal ball, and you don't even need a crystal ball because you have lots of data. I think you can have a good prediction what's coming. Yeah, so let's get started. Let's get to know you first. You want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Let's start with, normally you never start with what you studied, but I think it makes actually sense in my case. I studied statistics and econometrics. So that is super nerdy. I mean, really, and I originally thought that I would become actually a professor. And then realized, and hopefully no professor is listening, that you actually has zero impact on life, because you write papers and then other people quote these papers, but it doesn't change anything. And so I realized that, and then basically decided to move to the industry, to the other side. But so I have a background in data and in statistics, and then had my first career step was at Deutsche Telekom. where I worked for the CEO. That became too political at some point, and then I decided actually to join a startup, which is normally not interesting. But the first day I was at the startup, they said, "Oh, unfortunately, we closed the business today," and I was unemployed. And I had a wife who was American and didn't earn any money at that point, so I was a bit panicking. And just a good friend helped me to actually then move to the consultant side, and I worked for BCG for quite some time, and helped actually media companies to build new businesses, because it was obvious at some point print will die or not be as relevant as it used to be. And I did this for 7-8 years. And when you constantly advise other people, you should start this new business and start this new business, at some point you realize you have to jump.
Yeah.
Because it is, being a priest and not believing, you have to do it. And anyway, and so I decided then, when I was roughly 40, to start my own proper business. I had a consultancy beforehand, but my proper business, and that was Statista. And it was really a startup as you think about it. We had absolutely zero money. We started in a cellar, some students underpaid, no experience at all. And basically out of this, took us 17 years, but it developed into a nice brand. And then I stepped down last year as CEO after 17 years. I always said Frau Merkel did 16 and a half years. Okay, 17 years is really enough. And then had started beforehand ECDB, but then switched basically together with my partner Hubert, and then basically starting this year, we are now very active in growing ECDB.
Wow, it's a long time coming. I want to go back to the Statista times first. You had this idea and you had little resources. I'm curious, what was the initial product? Because when you look at companies like Netflix, they started selling DVDs. Companies, Amazon started with just selling books and then moved on to many different. What was the initial product of Statista?
The initial product is actually still the main product. So the initial idea was, shall we aggregate existing data and existing statistics from many, many different sources and basically put it on one platform.
Yeah.
And we had 2-3 things which were specific. One is, normally if you look at data companies, they're focused on one area.
Yeah.
And we decided, you know what, why don't we a little bit more ambitious and really have statistics for all areas, from agriculture to technology. Because if you look companies nowadays, they are less and less very industry specific and move more into different areas.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you take Volkswagen, Volkswagen, everyone would say, well, you just need automobile or the car statistics. But actually, you don't. They are an entertainment company because there's all the entertainment in the car.
True.
You need everything around transport, and so you need this kind of information. You need all the information about values of customers, how customers behave, because that changes so much. You need quite a lot of information around energy supply. So I believe large companies more and more are in many different areas and look for inspiration, look for areas where they can grow into. And therefore, it makes sense to have a platform which actually really covers all areas.
Yeah.
And that was not only an hypothesis, but of course, later we looked, are the customers really only looking for their data, or do they move and look really for the other data? And they do. So that worked out. So back to your original question, aggregate data and do it really for all industries and all countries.
Yeah.
And then prepare them in a way that people want to use them very quickly. Because we said, if you think about it, yes, there are situations where you basically have 2 months to find out one specific, specific industry measure or size of a market. But normally you prepare a presentation, you do something, and you have roughly 10 minutes, and you look for something.
Yeah.
And many people have this need very quickly to need information ready. I can put it into my presentation, so I can tell a story. And that was really the market we went for, and that worked out really nicely.
And also, as a founder, I have this luxurious position that I get to interview people that found what they love to do, right? Did you always know that you love, obviously you studied statistics, right? So did you always know that you want to go into this?
Not at all.
How did you develop this interest?
Why studied statistics? I'd always liked economics, and basically when you do economics, statistics are very important.
Yeah.
And then as a consultant, you always use data. And then actually what happened is, to be honest, before I had the idea, I told everyone I would start a new business. It was a bit like, sometimes you do things because you're frustrated. And I was in my life at a certain point where I said, listen, I need to change.
Yeah.
And so I told everyone, now I start a new business. And then of course people at some point ask you, hey, what are you doing? What is a business? And
what is the product?
Exactly. And then we realized, maybe that's a good point. Now, as we told everyone, and then had a long list of what alternative ideas we could do. Yeah. And it was really, typically consultants. Oh, we wanted to have a coffee chain that was Starbucks existed, but basically the knockoffs didn't exist anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
We wanted to have a fashion label. I think we even had this crazy idea about a Greek bank. And then, of course, once you go through it, you realize maybe it's a good idea, but you don't have a clue about it. You don't feel it.
Yeah.
And I think for all the founders, and there's one or two exceptions maybe, but for the majority of founders, you should always do what you're passionate about and where you almost feel the customer. You don't have to think about. And that was for us easy because we knew what consultants will look for. So we always had first in mind consultants and then universities. And so, long story short, we ended up having a data portal. And but what was interesting, although the idea was clear, for us it was not clear how it would look. Because there is no, when you're a copycat, you can always say, oh, in America they did it that way. Yeah. We can change the colors, but that's it.
Yeah.
But if you start something where you don't have a clear example, then it becomes difficult. And so our first portal looked exactly like Spiegel Online. In those days, everybody was crazy about Spiegel Online. Yeah. So basically it was Spiegel Online with data.
Wow.
And then we realized, honestly, we look constantly for all the pictures, Spiegel Online. We don't really need pictures of people, etc. They want to see the data. Or we had so much text around it. And then we realized, honestly, they don't want to text. They want to have a short explanation what people are seeing. And that's it. And so sometimes, maybe people have some clever people out there, they know upfront what it should look like, but for us it was really a process going through to discover what is really the essence or really the core of our product, and then present it in a very simple way.
In these 17 years, like you mentioned, it's like the total term of Merkel.
Mm-hmm.
And in these like almost 17 years of time at Statista, what were the top milestones that you think, okay, that was like game changing for us? Could you give us a couple of anecdotes?
Sure. So we had the idea 2007 that we would do something. Then in 2008, we had the brand name. It took us 6 months to find the name Statista, which sounds crazy, but I think a brand name, especially for a product which you trust, where you need trust, is extremely important.
Yeah.
And I do think the name Statista is not that bad, because it sounds very, very serious. You can pronounce it in every language. And honestly, the domain name was available. So we had to look a long time, and then launched the website 2008. Then we had probably 3-4 years where we almost made no money because the database, we had the promise, but the database was not filled. Nothing was optimized for Google yet. Google, you need a certain age, so
Yeah.
Google trusts you, and only then you get some traffic. So I would say the next major step was 2011, where Google discovered us, and we got a little bit of traffic and became famous in Germany. Then 2013 was a very important date for us for two reasons. Number one, we decided not only to aggregate data, but as well to develop our own data, our own forecast. And second, we decided to move to the US and as a first country to go international. And that took us time. And again, the first 1 or 2 years were very complicated for us, but that changed entirely the company. From a nice German niche provider, we became, or we pretended to be at least, an international player. And then the next major step, I think, was already the sell to Ströer. We sold the company in 2015. And typically when you sell a company, you have an earn-out phase.
Yeah.
So 2015 was the first step, and then 2017 the second step. And then maybe not for the company, but at least for the founders, what was very important, we decided not to leave the company, which many people do, but actually to stay on board.
You mean Hubert and you?
And really develop the company into an even larger company. And I think then what I have left out is, I think in 2019 or 20, we moved to Asia and then really invested into Asia, because I believe for the moment still the US is the largest market, but long-term Asia will be our largest market as for all the companies, then the US and then Europe.
So you're not you are no longer with Statista as an executive, but you're a chairman, as far as I know.
Yeah, as far as I know too.
So we are aligned on that one. So, I mean, then you decide with Hubert, who's also a co-founder of Statista,
correct,
to start a new company. Maybe we could name it your Second Spring.
Mm-hmm.
But why the hell didn't you just want to have? I mean, you have enough money to live probably after that exit, and you could spend your life on a beach, on an island or something. Like then you're like, no, I want to go back to the office and do something completely different.
It is actually an interesting phase, because when you think about yourself and what you really want to do, and I think people have different interests. Some people like to consume. It's great to have money and to spend money. Some people just like to relax. Other people like to discover something. I'm really crazy about creating something, creating and changing. That gives me the kick. Maybe it's an ego trip, I don't know, but it's something in which I honestly enjoy. And I do believe starting a new company and forming a company is a creative act. Yeah, I mean, bringing the people together, developing the product idea, putting everything in place. I mean, there's so many details. What is your marketing strategy? What's your brand looks like? What kind of people do you want to hire? What's your pricing strategy? All are fascinating questions, and to decide it and then to optimize it is something I deeply enjoy.
Yeah.
And so long story short is, for me, I thought about it, but I would say inside it was always clear for me. I wanted to do something and wanted to start a new company. And sometimes I have children which are now grown-ups, and I always said I always want to have a company. And even at the very end, it's a newspaper kiosk where you buy your newspaper, but at least you have to think something. You go somewhere, and it gives your life structure.
I love that. And that is also, we have the pleasure of also working together since quite some time. And you have a complete new office in the nice Speicherstadt of Hamburg, where I also like to come. And so tell us a little bit about what ECDB does.
Absolutely. First of all, what is similar to Statista and what is totally different, and then what is ECDB's purpose. The ECDB is a data platform where you find all relevant information about transaction businesses. What does it mean? So if we focus for the moment on the e-commerce market, hence we're here, and if you take Zalando, then Zalando as a moment, what are the relevant information? What is the monthly revenue? What is the product split? What is the number of buyers, number of transaction, etc.
Average order value.
Average order value. And we have this information for Zalando, and not only for Zalando, but really for all relevant retailers around the world.
Yeah.
We count 50 to 100,000. And that is on the retailer side. Then we take the same information and aggregate it and show it as well for the product and the markets, and soon as well for the consumer. Because in a nutshell, everything is based on one transaction, and you have always one transaction. And each transaction, they have, if you want, three kind of different information points. You always know who is the buyer, who is the retailer, what does the product look like, and the amount paid. And we actually buy single transactions in huge amounts and use this information in order to calculate all the different businesses. So for the moment, we analyze around 1 billion of transaction per month for all the different markets, not just for Germany, in order to come up with our data.
Yeah.
And that is new. And that is different to Statista. Statista aggregated a lot, but was never really in the raw data and analysis of the data, and certainly not this same amount. Whereas we, for the moment, what we try to do, buy as many different sources of alternative data in order to get better and better at these estimation models. And so that people, basically the retailers and everyone working around these transaction businesses, have access to the relevant information.
Who can benefit from the data that you're providing? Like you, and maybe you can also walk us through the business model that you've built with ECDB. How does it work, and how do you become a customer, and how can you make better business decisions?
Okay, these are many questions. Let's see if I remember them all. But let's start, who are our customers and how do they use it? So our groups are, number one, obviously retailers and manufacturers. Then you have agencies and consultancies, payment providers, logistics providers, IT companies. How do they use it? Let's start with the easy ones. We take a retailer, and the retailer has a certain revenue development in a month. Back to Zalando or Shop Apotheke, and then they say, oh, I grew 2% this month. Then, of course, they want to know, how have my competitors developed? And we have this information on a monthly basis, and always 7 days after the month is over, we publish it.
Wow.
Because we get it directly from the transaction data. So you see basically how your competitor is developing and how your market overall is developing. Then if your competitor, let's say, was more successful than you were, then of course the next question is why? And then, of course, you ask yourself, was it the AOV was higher? They had more buyers, more transaction, etc., etc. And so you basically can go into the data and understand why you have developed as you developed. And what's nice is sometimes people ask us, does all the 50,000 retailers give you the information so you can have the analysis? And of course, the question is no, they would never do that. So what we do is really, we get the information from all the banks, credit card companies, etc. And there then build the models in order to estimate how all the markets have evolved.
Wow. And the third part of the question was how your customers benefit from all this information to make... like looking at the competitors is a great thing. Let's say you're a CEO, and can you use the platform to make, let's say, the next 5-year plan of the company? Like how can I translate this information to my strategic planning?
I think the use cases behind it is, you have operational excellence. You have basically month by month, you go through it and then try to optimize it. And that definitely a very strong case. Then you say, okay, now the year ends. tell me in which markets I would like to go, how my market is growing next year, in which product category I should go.
Yeah.
And there you have all the information, which I believe at the very end, it is still feelings. Yeah, it's not only data, but I think data is always a foundation for a certain strategic decision.
Yeah,
that is how retailers and manufacturers use us. Agencies and consultancy obviously help the retailers to come up to this decisions, and therefore they use the data so that they have the data. And I think there's a different use case for logistic companies, payment companies, and IT service companies. They basically use the data in order to qualify their customers. Either to say that's a really relevant customer, who to address within a certain company, and as well, I make so much money with this customer, I could actually make much more because I see how they're performing.
Could it be fair to say that you're the number one data platform and market insights platform for e-commerce in the world?
I think modesty is always something which is useful. I know with marketing sometimes you have to exaggerate a little bit. I tell you what I think we are. I do believe there are other market information platforms out there, larger ones, which has been for a while. I do believe that what we do, so to have up-to-date information on a very granular level and for all different aspects, for retailers, for markets, and soon for consumers, that is unique. And that will definitely help us to become the number one at some point. But it is interestingly, it's a unique proposal, and not even in Germany, but it's actually a unique proposal around the world.
Absolutely.
And that's, obviously, sorry, as a founder, you sometimes look everything to pink glasses, but that is what I'm proud about it. It is, again, something which has, yes, we all use data, but gives the whole thing a different angle, which I think could be extremely interesting in the future.
I have to say, I have access to the platform since April, May timeframe this year, and I'm absolutely blown away by the insights. And we will get to, as the next, but some of my next questions have to do with how you, as the founder of ECDB, see the retail landscape as we approach 2025. So I will ask you, of course, how you see the market as is. What are the most pressing issues in e-commerce as we speak?
By the way, I have forgotten to answer your last question, which was, and what's the business model around it? Which is very simple. It's a subscription business, and you typically pay around 9,000 euros, and then one department or one company has access for a year, and that is how it works. And so very straightforward.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. And as far as I know, you also provide tailor-fit data analysis solutions.
Correct. For many companies, the platform is the answer, and sometimes people have much more focused question. And then it's probably better even to say, okay, can we do typical project work where we deep dive into all our data and then make the analysis. Both is possible.
I think by now we've gotten a good feeling about who you are and how you approach your businesses, be it Statista or ECDB. And now I'm really anxious. I can't wait to get to the bottom of how you see the market. So let's talk about state of things in the e-commerce market in Germany as we speak. How do you see the market development?
In Germany or worldwide?
Well, let's start with Germany.
Okay. Let's start first when you listen to many people when they talk about the e-commerce market in Germany. People, for the moment, they sound a little bit depressed, is such a strong word, but not extremely happy, and that is obviously understandable, because after Corona during Corona we were in this hype situation where we only grow 20%, why not 30%, why not 40%, and people had forgotten that it is already a very, very large market. You cannot grow constantly 40%. So of course there was, after Corona, the big phase where everybody realized, okay, they were even shrinking for some time.
Yeah.
I would call it a normal. We were normalized, or the market normalized. Now, if you look at the different market, we are far from being stuck somewhere, but it is really a situation where you still see some segments really growing, even exploding.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big fan from everything around health and healthcare. And that's a market which develops. It is so interesting to look into the grocery market, because the grocery market really in 2024 and in 2020 is changing so much.
Yeah.
And you see there basically all the major chains investing more and more, and becomes almost normal for people constantly to get delivered their food.
Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw 14.5% growth
Absolutely.
for grocery.
Absolutely. And why do I know that, especially in Germany, that will continue?
Yeah.
Because if you look actually their international markets, Germany is not as developed as an e-commerce market for grocery. And they're the reasons why we love our Lidl, Aldi, etc. And they have such a strong one. So if you look to the UK or France, the grocery market is much, the e-commerce grocery markets is much, much bigger than in Germany.
Yeah.
So I do believe what we see right now is they're really catching up.
Wow.
Okay, so these are, there we see really movement and development. Is every segment like this? No, of course not. As we all know, I would say fashion and electronics have a slightly more difficult time for many different reasons. And there it is, the growth rate is, especially if I remember correctly, this year and last year, close to zero.
Yeah.
And so that's overall the situation. I would still see that we had a little bit of growth in 2024. It will, if we see our first forecast next year, it will grow a little bit more.
Yeah.
I would say around 6% maybe. But if you look at the different sectors, you clearly have different developments. Certain markets, again, grocery, health, do-it-yourself, really growing. Fashion, electronics, furniture, for instance, maybe not growing as much as they used to.
But then again, fashion and electronics already constitute 50% of the
100%.
entire market.
Exactly.
So
they're
quite big already.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting what you said about the furniture market. It's even like the growth. How does it look for that?
And it's not, again, there, many people, there was, during the Corona phase, there were typical things where people invested more, and then things they invested less. Yeah. So as we all know, tourism was not really a booming sector during Corona. People saved a lot of money, and they actually, we call it cocooning, basically invested a lot into their house. So online furniture delivery really exploded during this phase. Obviously now, it is not really, it is basically close to zero or even shrinking in some
We had
parts.
Home24 in the podcast,
Exactly.
so we also had an interesting conversation. I can just, as a consumer, I can absolutely agree with you. We made so many purchases with our garden that time. Inside our apartment, we bought so much furniture and stuff because you spend so much more time. But now we're not doing that.
And now we're
anymore.
traveling again.
Yeah.
So that is on the number part. Then I see what are the major trends. And I think for the moment, I would say the trends 25 doesn't look so different from 24. Mm-hmm. So I give you a couple of topics and you decide in which one we would like to go into. And I give you a hint. The first one I mentioned, wink, wink, I feel is really interesting. So there's number one, cross-border. Yeah, that is actually cross-border e-commerce is for the moment growing faster for different reasons than e-commerce just in the country. Yeah. Then there's obviously, secondly, I think marketplaces there's an interesting development. I wouldn't say that marketplaces don't grow anymore, but you see certain areas where the marketplace is even shrinking a little bit. and you see closures of marketplaces. And then there's others where you see that more marketplaces are coming. So still there's a little bit of development around marketplaces. Then we have everything around profitability stays a topic. Then we, of course, have the Asian expansion, or what is the appropriate word for it, and that will continue. Then we have a small topic, but it becomes more relevant, B2B, which is very much linked, obviously, to profitability.
Yeah, we will get to profitability in a few seconds, but I think it's also important to say, like, the market will look somehow similar. Some marketplaces will grow. We've had Kaufland in the podcast, and they're growing by 30+%.
If I have to say, if there is one brand I'm really impressed by, it's Kaufland.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, I mean, Kaufland was obviously, the story was Kaufland used to, I mean, sorry, you know better now with the podcast, but if I remember correctly, Kaufland used to be actually a brand which was strong in Berlin and in some areas here, but it was more a local brand. It was acquired by Lidl, and they really did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And now both
Schwarzgruppe, right?
Yeah. And now the marketplace is fantastic. I mean, and how they grow and how aggressive they are.
Yeah. But then again, when I look at Zalando, I see more of a stagnation.
Correct. When it comes to fashion, I would say stagnation. First of all, yes, Zalando, About You, Otto, they're not exploding right now because, as we said, the fashion market is not exploding, and especially now more they realize different brands, they should become more profitable. And of course, people know that marketplaces are not always the best place to be extremely profitable. Putting this aside, so there I agree. But even and now side comments, even sometimes we say, oh, they're not exploding, etc. We all know how hard it is if you run such a business, even sometimes to stay at the same level where you are. So I always want, knowing some of the founders and who run these businesses, I still think they're all doing a fantastic job, even if the growth rate is not 10% or whatever.
Yeah, and we probably won't have time to go into the Asian giants, but like just a few words on this. They're challenging a German marketplace because they are marketplaces like,
correct,
Temu, Shein, but not only AliExpress. I mean, Trendyol in Turkey it's the biggest marketplace in the country, and they constitute 20% of all Asian, all of the GMV from these Asian players in Europe. Right. So
and yes, by the way, if you go on ECDB, then you can see the exact revenue numbers. And yes, they have grown already from 2022 to 2023, and you see that the growth rate is even increasing from 2023 to 2024. And there are a couple of reasons for it. I don't think it's only intelligence, tax evasion, but what actually they do is, when other people focus on profitability, they obviously focus just on growth. And there are good arguments in both directions, what is right. But what I love about them is a very, very intelligent way in order to acquire customers. Yeah, I mean, giving free products, even if the quality is extremely low, giving free products in order to win your customer is something new we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, it's a challenge for many. Before we get to profitability, I read even that Temu, just alone on Meta, they spent $1.2 billion in ad spends. And that's just huge. Anyway, so I'm curious about your thoughts on, we will get to pricing, we will start talking about profitability. That I've been talking to quite a few area experts from SAP MRSys. He also mentioned, hey, there is this huge focus on profitability right now. How do you see that? Like, how did we end up here?
Let's start with, is it relevant that company focus on profitability? Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, but interestingly for me is, I believe many companies haven't realized yet what it really means. And let me explain that, because it sounds, of course, a bit obnoxious, but nevertheless, let me explain that. Because actually with Statista, I went through a similar phase, and so I know a little bit what I'm talking about. Many companies, of course, in the boom phase where we had very low interest rates, were focused on growth. Why? Of course, they said, listen, then I go ahead, and at some point, once I'm there, I can always become profitable. And they basically did the same thing what Amazon did as a very good example. Listen, I grow. Do you want to see that I'm profitable? And I think Amazon at 1 year decided, okay, listen, we go stop growing, and the profitability went up.
Yeah.
Reason number one is. Reason number two is, in my opinion, that many of the shops, of course, had in mind, and then I can sell the shop.
Yeah.
And you sell it by multiples based on sales.
Yeah.
Okay. I do believe that for many shops, that door is closed. Yeah, you cannot sell it anymore. What happened afterwards? The interest rates increased, and basically all the private equity companies says, listen, now we have to focus on profitability. What do people do then? First, they say, okay, we have to save a little bit on marketing. Then they say, can we increase a little bit the prices if possible? Then they say, can we save a little bit on personnel? So everyone is optimizing almost along the value chain. Where can they save a little bit? And of course, that's right. That is what you do. But now comes the message. In my opinion, we all have to step back a little bit and ask ourselves, if now we run companies whose main purpose is really to generate profit, then to ask, what do I provide as a service, as a product, where I believe in that I can in the long term or constantly generate profit, not only from a second or month to another one, but I have a position that is so strong that I see even in this very competitive market, I can generate profit.
Yeah.
And I think many of the companies I spoke to haven't really answered this question properly. Because either you say, oh, I have such a strong brand like Apple, people are willing to pay more because they just love the brand, they believe in the brand, and they say, and they're correct. Second, I have just a better cost position. Yeah. For a certain niche product, I can be cheaper than everybody else. Or I found such an interesting niche position or broader position where I just create the best products. And people know they can, basically, they love these products, and that is fine. Mm-hmm. But I feel many of the companies I see, this is not really answered. I try to be subtle because I know how difficult it is really to answer it. But it's not really answered where they believe in the long run they have a position where they constantly can generate profit.
Yeah.
And therefore I believe there will be basically, or there should be, a strategic process or the company should go through.
Given this focus on profitability, you were typically talking about two target groups, existing customers and new customers. Mm-hmm. Which one should be more in focus?
Obviously, sorry. Do you need both? Yes, 100%. Do you generate profit with existing customers? Yes. You would for new customers, if you win new customers and you don't, and it is basically you cover all your costs, that is fantastic. Yeah. Normally you invest more because it's so difficult to find new customers. So if you need to generate, the main thing I would focus on is reduce the churn and basically generate revenues with your existing customers. And that is the main source.
Okay. And I know that you also organize regular events in Hamburg with thought leaders and experts from the industry. The last event just a couple of weeks ago was on pricing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you want to share a couple of thoughts about where things are in terms of pricing. We have ad hoc pricing, dynamic pricing. Do you have some tips for brands how they should construct their pricing strategy?
It was actually interesting. So what we do is we have this network event because we do have actually quite a lot of e-commerce companies around Hamburg, and it's actually nice to talk to them. And basically, I see all the data, but sometimes it's important to hear what problems do they have, so that I get more focused really on the topics. And they propose, can we talk about pricing? Why? Surprise, surprise. Everybody knows it's profitability, and the next step is how can I basically manage my pricing? And there were simple conclusions we came up with during the discussion. Number one is that we really, really have to move pricing to a top management level. So all the companies define certain rules how they can manage pricing, and that is defined by the top management, because of course pricing is the lever number one for profitability. Second, they all have to revisit their marketplace strategy, because we all know once you on a marketplace, basically if you have an overstock, etc., that's really helpful. But otherwise, your main sales channel should not be the marketplace. Then I think the only thing we came up with then during the discussion is that we should not have cost-based pricing, but much more value-based pricing. And how we can basically deduct the value from our customers through subscription models, through the old, what was it, the club model, brands for friends, etc., which exists for a while. There, of course, there's no one answer which fits all the different models. There's basically where the thinking has to start. But otherwise, I would say strategic level, revisit your marketplace strategy, shouldn't be cost-based, but definitely value-based. If I remember correctly, these were the main points.
How about brand? Being a brand, I think interestingly, that has an impact on so many things in e-commerce, even returns.
Absolutely. Let me just have a sip of coffee and then we come to the brand.
You're allowed to.
It is, I know we had, I think it was during the event as well, a discussion, which was the following. People moved more and more of their marketing budget from different channels to performance-based. And
from upper to lower.
Correct. And of course, because then they say, listen, then at least I know it is properly allocated, but we all know the more performance-based and the lower you are, the more you're focused directly on sales. And that makes so much sense. And especially if you're in the business, you know how much sense. But of course, it means on the other hand, you invest less and less into your brand and more into your immediate sales. And I think we agree, if you say that you want to have loyal customers, then the next step is these loyal customers must love your brand. And therefore, you need to find ways to create this loyal brand, this fantastic brand. Is marketing the only way? No. Has in the past been marketing the main way in order to build a brand? Yes. So it is interesting, although we all understand why we are all more performance-based and more search, basically use search advertising. We believe, or I believe, we should revisit ways how we can build a proper brand as a retailer.
Absolutely. And we have, I had the pleasure to interview a lot of brands as well. I mean, we've the last time I did the opening speech at the e-commerce Berlin Expo, I also gave the example of IKEA, because they have such a strong loyalty among their customers, and even through this fluctuation that happened in 2022 with the Ukrainian war, with the inflation crisis and all that, they heavily invested in their innovation, and they managed to stay afloat because they have a very, very strong brand. I think a brand is like your insurance in hard times, is my personal opinion. Absolutely. And like even brand has an impact on your returns.
100%.
It's everything, basically, how your customer interacts with you. I think it's having like this stamina as a business to think a bit beyond just like the quarter, as you said. Just think beyond each quarter.
And to give you an example, for instance, going back to Statista, and we do it with ECDB now the same. Statista never invested properly in like advertising in newspapers or anything like this. But what we did is we very early on discovered content marketing. Why? Because we have all the content. And so we had a department of 30 people who produce on a daily basis infographics around the world. But that was mainly not in order to sell, but really to create a brand. So what I want to say is there are different ways to do it, but yes, indeed, as you said, the brand is the insurance, and the brand is what you need in order to have loyal customers.
By the way, Friedrich, just not only Statista, but also ECDB has a huge insights section that I'm a truly fan of, where you can find infographics completely for free, and like regarding so many markets, so many segments. So I would recommend everyone to check this out, because there are absolutely no strings attached. It's available to everyone. But then again, it increases your discoverability as a platform and the value that you bring to the market.
Correct. Yeah. No, we do have the same idea now. Basically, it's content marketing, an intelligent way in order to build a brand. Which, if you have the data, I believe all the brands can do content marketing, but of course, if you have the data, it's especially easy.
I want to ask you also, you've been around seeing several stages of e-commerce from early days up until now, and maybe you can compare the modern e-commerce that we are in right now. It's gotten very complex. And then there's the traditional e-commerce engine that you've seen for many, many years. What are one of the top considerations that you've seen change so rapidly where we are today? Because at the end of each podcast episode, we try to leave some key takeaways. How can I be successful in today's world, in the new e-commerce world?
Well, thank you very much to leave the complicated question for the very end. Until now, it was fun. Now I have to think hard.
Sorry.
No. Let's start with some common places and then to get warm. I do believe if we look back 10, 15 years ago, basically once e-commerce was just starting, for people it was just enough basically to say, listen, where's my market? That's an easy way in order that I present my products and people can then buy it, and then you optimize your process and it's fine. It was very much jump into the water, do roughly everything right, and that's okay. Actually, now I become philosophical. What is e-commerce nowadays, especially with the integration of omni-channel? Basically, we are almost a part of all industries. So what I want to say is, if you look at groceries, fashion, whatever, we're talking not anymore about one special channel who is happy to basically to evolve, but we're almost talking about the entire industry is somehow linked to e-commerce, directly or indirectly. Because it is not anymore one channel, but because of omni-channel, it's part of the entire system. So we go back now. And then there's some, sorry, and then I come to some lovely areas which are not covered yet, and we will still see, the more we go into B2B and luxury products, etc., there is still some new areas which make certain things easier. But now our main categories, electronics, fashion, etc., I believe when we talk now about it, we really always talk about what is our strategic position in the entire market. Yeah, and so if you take Douglas, their e-commerce strategy is very much linked to their overall strategy.
Yeah.
And how do I basically lock my customer in and can serve them both at home and in the shop. And so as I said, it's less e-commerce specific questions and more general business questions which influence your position.
Yeah.
Are they still these lovely niches where we start seeing something? Yes, they still exist. And I'll give you an example which I really love. The car industry. Everybody's talking about Volkswagen. I don't know if you remember, I would say 3-4 years ago, especially in Corona, basically all the car companies came up and says, you know what? In 2-3-4 years, 25% of our cars will be sold via the internet. And why did they say that? Because these poor people, no one during the Corona age went to the car sellers, to the shops. Second, everyone copies Tesla. And of course, Tesla has an intelligent way of selling things.
Yeah.
Now, if we look now, do we have the feeling that 25% of... No, of course not. I mean,
times have changed.
It is a bit frustrating, but I would say, especially with our more traditional sellers, very, very few people buy their cars online. Why do I love it? Because do you believe that will stay that way? Or do you believe, okay, they try to have a simple way, but I still think that people will buy cars online because Tesla has shown it is possible. Yeah. We all know what we need is to simplify the product. You can't have any more 2,000 different ways how to assemble your car, but basically it's very general. But there are ways, and I'm so curious to see how this will evolve.
Totally.
But it's a different sector, whereas all the other sectors, it is also very present, and typically the online share is around 20%, and then you have some areas such as fashion and electronics where it's 50%.
Yeah.
But what I want to say, there's still these partially undiscovered area which people have discovered, hasn't worked out, but they still will come.
Totally. And you've given the example of Tesla. I like this example also because Tesla is in a way the iPhone of the automobile industry, because the whole approach, and not just iPhone, but like Apple, because Apple kind of disrupted the industry back in the day when, in comparison to Dell had so many different versions of the same laptop. It got so sophisticated to even choose a product where they just came up with like divisions, MacBook, iPhone, and everything. It's fairly easy to make a decision. And so I think this disillusionment of choice, I don't know what it's called, but like when you have too many options,
100%,
it makes the sale quite sophisticated.
But if I'm still a good German, and therefore Apple dominates in a certain way, of course, the phone industry. Tesla changed many things. I'm still not sure if they dominate the same way as Apple does the car industry, because there are good reasons to buy a Tesla, but there's good reasons not to buy it. And so I would say they changed a lot of things. I don't see the dominance yet Apple has on the phone industry.
Well, let's watch it happen. I'm not an expert in this particular industry, but I like to follow it. And
the next 2-3 years, especially what we see right now with Volkswagen, will be very interesting to see how this changes. Absolutely.
Friedrich, I want to thank you once again for coming all the way to Berlin and enlightening us with your expertise and the knowledge that you bring from so many years. And it's been a massive pleasure listening to you, especially the fact that we touched upon not only your interesting and inspiring founding journey with Statista and ECDB, but also your insights on the overall development of the market and how, like you mentioned, the winning and the losing segments, so to speak, where we should be watching closely. And I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners and viewers as well. Thank you so much.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the EGN Podcast. If you found our discussion insightful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Your support helps us grow and improve our content. See you next time.